إنه أهم شيء تبسيطها هذه الإجراءات وتيسيرها واختصارها حتى الناس تنضم. لأنه كل ما كان البروسيس طويل أنت حتضطر تبدأ في تحديث المعلومات التي بدأتها أول. فهذه مهمة جدا لاختصار هذا. أيضا المنظمة اتخاذ قراراتها بالإجماع، وهنالك أمر أيضا يتطلب مناقشات ثنائية مع بعض الدول ذات الثقل ذات الوزن هكذا. نحن نقترح أيضا المنظمة أيضا والدول العربية أيضا تنسق مشاورات غير رسمية مع هذه الدول حتى تنضم كل الدول التي ترغب أو تسعى إلى أن الانضمام إلى المنظمة. ودي هذه أشياء مهمة جدا. نرى أيضا برضه تسديد إيراد شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا. ناخذ سؤال من ست. بس سؤال واحد من ست.
My name is Aisha Chinaine. I'm a journalist with Venture Magazine. My question is focused on free trade agreements between industrialized and developing countries. I think a lot of questions have been raised about the fact that these kinds of agreements tend to be more costly to the developing country, especially in terms of local production, which has been weakened, chances at economic self-sufficiency.
Did you introduce yourself?
Yes, I did.
You did?
So my question is why would a developing country like Jordan be very, very interested in entering more FTA agreements with industrialized countries when it's really weighing very heavily on our trade deficit, trade balance? And what are the advantages, and also an honest answer about the disadvantages that we face as a country when we enter such agreements?
Thank you.
Okay, let's.
The floor is yours now.
Yeah. So, very quickly, because I will have to leave for the palace. On the question about Jordan as a quasi-landlocked country, we're not yet there. We still have a port in Aqaba through which quite a lot of your trade happens. But you're right, let's say you're surrounded by countries who are having difficult times. Now, what can be done? Let's leave the political issues aside. That's not for WTO, which is a technical organization. I think short term what you can do is streamline your border systems with your neighbors. In many cases, crossing these borders is still too much of a problem. You have administrative operations, you have a whole lot of administrative thickness of your borders. Short term, what you can do is shrink this in, by the way, negotiating this big trade facilitation agreement, which we are negotiating in Geneva, which is a multilateral one, but where many, many countries who are de facto landlocked will have a huge benefit, because by definition, if you have two thick borders, it's landlocked countries who are the main victims of that. So short term, I would say, try and streamline your customs operations, which implies bilateral streamlining negotiations with your neighbors. On the bridge building with others, it's the other issue which you have in this region, which is a relatively low level of infrastructures that connect the economies of the region together. Whether it's rail, whether it's road, whether it's harbors, whether it's energy grids, although Jordan in this area is a bit better than average, because you have the capacity to connect with Egypt and with Syria. But that's where I would put a sort of medium-term focus. And there are, with what we call aid for trade, which is a series of support coming from multilateral or bilateral development assistance organizations, we have sort of, $40, $60 billion available a year to trade capacity building. World Bank, European Development Fund, the USA, the NCC. So this is a sort of tank on which the region could probably tap more in order to build proper logistics and infrastructure. On the question by PA, the old pattern of trade, let's say 20 or 30 years ago, was a bit what you described. In European countries, poor countries, selling basic resources to countries who would manufacture. This world is over. It's like Middle Ages now. In the world of today, starting with Asia, where of course this totally new pattern of trade emerged, the world is a sort of global supply chain. And each country steps in these multi-localized production systems as a function of its comparative advantage. And the best, of course, the best example of that is what Asia has been doing for the last 20 years. And when I gave you the number of intra-regional trade a moment ago, I saw a number of you in the room saying, how is it that Asia does 50% and we are up to 10%? That's where the big difference is. In many areas, this region is still in the old world of trade, whereas the rest of the world is moving full speed into the new world of trade, which is these global supply chains. And I think this is something which you will have to adjust upfront. We can help in WTO in adjusting the WTO rulebook to these new patterns of trade, which is why, for instance, the question I mentioned for Jordan, which is border crossing, has become so important. In the past, when you were trading, you had one border to cross. Well, the border was thick, you had one problem of thickness of border. In the world of today, where 60% of trade is parts and components, where the import content of your exports on average worldwide is 40%, you have to cross 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 borders. So in today's world, the thickness of border is much more of a problem. Because if you cross 6 times thick borders, the cost of doing this becomes huge. Sudan has been negotiating its accession since 1994, which is roughly 20 years ago. The only Arab country that started earlier than Sudan is Algeria, who started in 1987. So that's obviously too long. There are many reasons for that, and I hope that now that we have 2 Sudans, accession of 2 Sudans will be quicker than accession of 1 Sudan. Let's hope. On the last question, before we rush on FTAs, it's a very complex question. These bilateral agreements have costs, benefits. It's not yes or no, it's not black on white. It depends. It depends on what's in there. It depends on the element of reciprocity which countries can get on top of what they get in the WTO. But in general, it is true that if a poor developing country negotiates a bilateral agreement with a rich, big, either developing or developed country, the balance of forces in the negotiation will be less fair than if it's multilateral. That's pretty clear. So it's each country to decide whether it's worth or not. There is no, again, no general prescription. We all have to know that entering into this sort of negotiation with a big elephant is a risk